The light within the grand conclave of the Cathar ascendancy was a living entity, a shimmering, golden mist that eddied and flowed with the emotional currents of the assembled delegates. It clung to the polished obsidian floors, reflecting the myriad forms of the ascendancy's constituent species in distorted, elongated shapes. The air itself was thick with unspoken anxieties, a palpable tension that resonated in the subtle trembling of the crystalline chimes suspended from the vaulted, cavernous ceiling. These chimes, meant to soothe and bring harmony to debate, now offered only a discordant, nervous tinkle, a soundtrack to a crisis that had gripped the heart of their star-spanning civilization. At the center of this immense chamber, a holographic representation of the object of their collective dread hung suspended in the golden light. It was a silent, brooding thing, a shard of impossible geometry and utter blackness that seemed to absorb the very light that illuminated it. For cycles, it had drifted in the void of the Veil Nebula, a ghost in the stellar nursery, discovered by a deep-range survey team. They had called it the Artifact, a name that bespoke a sense of ancient reverence, of something left behind by a civilization long since turned to dust. Yet, as the cycles wore on, reverence had curdled into a cold, creeping fear. High Counselor Thrax, a being of living stone whose craggy features had been shaped by millennia of patient deliberation, surveyed the assembled delegates. His gaze, like the slow grinding of tectonic plates, passed over the insectoid forms of the Cygnian technocracy, their multifaceted eyes glittering with cold logic. He saw the ethereal, gaseous figures of the Lumini, their forms shifting and swirling within their containment fields, their thoughts expressed in waves of colored light. He noted the rigid, militaristic posture of the Vulcarian hegemony's representative, a towering, fur-covered warrior whose claws rested impatiently on the control panel of his floating dais. Each of them, in their own way, radiated a disquiet that transcended species and ideology. The artifact was the cause. It was a puzzle that defied their most advanced sciences, a lock for which they possessed no key. Its composition was unknown, its purpose inscrutable. It emitted no energy, no radiation, no heat. It was a perfect void, a wound in the fabric of spacetime that simply was. And now, after countless cycles of silent observation, it had begun to change. The consensus of the technocracy remains unchanged. A chorus of synthesized clicks and chirps emanated from the Cygnian delegation. The artifact represents a technological singularity. Its silence is not dormancy, it is a state of being beyond our comprehension. To interfere with it, to attempt to awaken what we cannot understand, is to invite a cataclysm of our own making. We advocate for continued observation, nothing more. The Cygnian delegate's statement was met with a ripple of dissent. The Lumini delegate pulsed a deep, troubled violet, a color of profound philosophical disagreement. To observe is to be passive, their translated thoughts whispered through the chamber's acoustic field. And passivity in the face of the unknown is a form of intellectual cowardice. This object, this presence, it has been in our space for an unknowable length of time. We have a duty, a sacred obligation to seek understanding. What if it is not a weapon but a key, a message, a legacy left for us to find? The Vulcarian representative, General Xyler, let out a low growl that vibrated through the chamber floor. A legacy, or a tombstone, my people have a saying, a sleeping predator is still a predator. We have sent fleets to its periphery. Our most powerful sensors have been brought to bear, and they have revealed nothing. It is as if the universe itself ends at its surface. This is not the mark of a benevolent creator. It is the mark of a fortress, a cage. And I, for one, do not wish to be here when the door is opened. His words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. The fear of the unknown was a powerful current, and Xyler was a master at directing its flow. He represented the primal, instinctual fear that the artifact had awakened in the collective consciousness of the ascendancy. The fear of something older, stronger, and utterly indifferent to their existence. High Counselor Thrax, his stony form unmoving, allowed the silence to stretch, to press down on the delegates. He had seen empires rise and fall, had witnessed the birth and death of stars. He was not a being given to flights of fancy or fits of panic. But the artifact troubled him in a way that nothing had for eons. It was not its silence that was so unnerving, but the feeling of profound, deliberate intent that seemed to radiate from it, a feeling that their most sensitive instruments could not detect, yet which every sentient mind in the ascendancy could feel in the deepest wreck. Esses of their being, it was the feeling of being watched. The debate is noted. Thrax's voice was the sound of mountains shifting, ancient and slow. But the circumstances have evolved. The reason for this extraordinary session of the conclave is not to reevaluate our long-held positions, but to address a new and deeply unsettling development. He made a subtle gesture with one of his many-jointed limbs, and the holographic representation of the artifact shifted. A new data stream overlaid the image, a cascade of symbols and readings that sent a fresh wave of shock through the assembled delegates. The Cygnian technocrats leaned forward in unison, their antennae twitching in agitation. The Lumini's light flickered with a panicked, strobe-like intensity. Even General Zyler's stoic composure seemed to crack, his fur bristling with alarm. The data was impossible. The artifact, for the first time since its discovery, was emitting a signal. It was not a broadcast, not a hail, not a warning. It was a single, repeating pulse of energy, so faint that it was almost lost in the background radiation of the nebula. But it was there, and its source was undeniably the silent, black object that had haunted their dreams for so long. What is it? The Lumini delegates' thoughts were a frantic flurry of colors. A distress call, a prelude to activation. The Cygnian technocrats were already processing the data, their collective minds working at a speed that other species found bewildering. The signal is structured. Their synthesized voice was strained, as if the concept itself was difficult to articulate. It is not random. It contains information, a staggering amount of it, but the encoding. It is unlike anything we have ever encountered. It is biological. A stunned silence descended upon the chamber. Biological. The word was an anomaly, a contradiction in terms when applied to the cold, dead object they had been studying. The artifact was a machine, a construct. It could not be biological, and yet the data was irrefutable. It is a genome, the Cygnian delegate continued, the clicks and chirps of their speech now laced with a sense of dawning horror. A complete genetic sequence, incredibly complex, more so than any known life form in the galaxy, and it is repeating, a message written in the language of life itself. The implications of this revelation were staggering. The artifact was not just a machine. It was a vessel, a repository, a seed, and something had just triggered its germination. The debate that followed was more frantic, more desperate than any that had come before. The Vulcarians called for an immediate preemptive strike, for the annihilation of the artifact before it could unleash whatever biological horror it contained. The Lumini argued for caution, for a deeper attempt to understand the message before reacting with violence. The Cygnians, for their part, were lost in the data, their scientific curiosity warring with their ingrained sense of self-preservation. They were a species that had always believed that anything could be understood, catalogued, and controlled through logic and reason. But the artifact was beginning to feel like a god, a silent, slumbering deity whose dreams were now starting to stir. It was in the midst of this chaotic debate that the second change occurred. It was not a sudden event, but a slow, almost imperceptible transformation. The holographic representation of the artifact, which had been a static image, began to shift. Faint lines of light, as thin as a spider's thread, started to trace patterns across its impossibly black surface. They were not random. They were organized, geometric, flowing with a purpose that was both beautiful and terrifying. The chamber fell silent once more, every delegate transfixed by the sight. The lines of light coalesced, forming intricate, interlocking patterns that resembled the neural pathways of a brain or the circulatory system of some vast, sleeping creature. The artifact was waking up. Then came the sound. It was not transmitted through the chamber's acoustic field, but seemed to emanate directly into the minds of every being present. It was a low, resonant hum, a sound that felt older than the stars themselves. It was the sound of immense power held in reserve, of a heart that was beginning to beat after an eternity of slumber. And with that sound, the true nature of the artifact began to reveal itself. The impossibly black surface seemed to recede, to peel back like the petals of a flower, revealing a structure within that was not black, but a deep gunmetal gray. It was a ship, a warship. Its lines were sleek, predatory, yet possessed an elegance that spoke of a design philosophy that was as much art as it was engineering. And it was vast, larger than any vessel the Ascendancy had ever constructed. The golden light of the conclave chamber seemed to dim, to shrink away from the holographic image of the Nawawak. And vessel. The delegates who represented the collected power and wisdom of 1,000 worlds were rendered speechless, their political squabbles and philosophical debates suddenly seeming insignificant, childish in the face of what they were witnessing. They had believed it was an artifact, a relic of a dead and forgotten age. They had debated its meaning, its purpose, its potential threat. They had treated it as an object, a thing to be studied and controlled. And they had been wrong. So very, very wrong. The Human Warship, after an eon of silent slumber in the heart of the Veil Nebula, had roared to life, and the galaxy would never be the same. The roar was not a sound in the conventional sense. It was a wave of pure, focused energy that washed over the Cathar Ascendancy's sensor networks, a silent, screaming declaration of presence that overloaded systems and shattered the complacency of an entire civilization. The ship, once a perfect void, was now a blinding star of activity, its energy signature dwarfing that of a blue giant. Yet it remained stationary, a silent, steel predator hanging in the stardusted blackness of the nebula. The initial panic that had seized the Grand Conclave slowly gave way to a cold, professional dread. Fleets were mobilized, defense grids were brought to full alert, and a quarantine zone was established around the Veil Nebula, a futile gesture against a power that so clearly operated on a different scale of existence. The Cygnians, their logical minds reeling from the sheer impossibility of the energy readings, fell into a state of near catatonic analysis, their collective consciousness consumed by the data pouring in. The Vulcarians, their warrior instincts screaming, chafed at the order to hold their positions, their fleets of warships looking like minnows circling a leviathan. And the Lumini, their ethereal forms flickering with a deep, existential terror, simply watched, their philosophical musings on the nature of the universe now replaced by a raw, primal fear of the unknown. High Counselor Thrax, his stony form a bastion of calm in the storm of panic, kept his gaze fixed on the holographic representation of the Human Warship. The initial shock had passed, and now in its place was a profound and unsettling sense of awe. The ship was not acting aggressively. It had not fired a weapon, had not made any move to leave the nebula. It was simply there, a silent, patient giant that had awoken from a long dream, and it was communicating. The biological signal, the genome, had ceased. In its place was a new transmission, a complex, multi-layered signal that was directed not at the Ascendancy as a whole, but at the individual species that comprised it. The Cygnian technocracy received a stream of pure mathematics, elegant, beautiful equations that described the fundamental laws of the universe in a way they had never conceived of. The Lumini were bathed in a symphony of light and sound, a celestial orchestra that spoke of creation, of life, of the interconnectedness of all things. The Vulcarians received a different kind of message, a silent, stoic transmission of martial philosophy, of honor, of the responsibility that came with great power. It was a masterstroke of diplomacy, a message tailored to the deepest cultural and psychological archetypes of each species, a demonstration of an intelligence so profound, so empathetic, that it bordered on the divine. The Cathar, Thrax's own people, a species of ancient, patient stone beings who valued history and memory above all else, received the most unsettling message of all. It was a history, not of the humans but of the Cathar themselves, a complete, unabridged history from their primordial origins as non-sentient mineral life forms to their rise as a spacefaring civilization. It was a history that was more complete, more detailed than their own records, containing information that had been lost to time, to wars, to the slow erosion of memory. The message was clear: we know you. We have always known you. We have been watching. The implications of this were terrifying. The Human Warship was not a recent arrival. It had been in their space, in their nebula, for millennia, a silent, unseen observer to their entire history. They were not a discovery. They were a known quantity. The Grand Conclave reconvened, the atmosphere in the chamber now thick with a heavy, suffocating humility. The arrogance, the fear, the political posturing of the previous session were gone, replaced by a shared sense of profound insignificance. They were children squabbling in the dark who had just realized that an adult had been in the room with them all along, listening to their every word. We must respond. The Lumini delegates' thoughts were a soft, humbled glow of pale blue. To ignore such a message, such a demonstration of understanding, would be an insult of the highest order. General Xyler, his usual bluster gone, nodded in agreement. His fur was flat, his posture no longer that of a proud warrior, but of a soldier in the presence of a superior officer. The message they sent my people, it was not a threat, it was a lesson, a teaching. They spoke of the warrior's code, of the duty to protect the weak, of the strength that comes from restraint. They are not conquerors, they are guardians. The Cygnians, having finally pulled their collective consciousness back from the brink of analytical overload, offered their own, equally unsettling assessment. The mathematics they sent us, it is a blueprint for a new kind of physics. It proves the existence of dimensions we had only theorized, of energies we had never dreamed of. It is the key to everything. They have given us the secrets of the universe freely without asking for anything in return. This is not the action of an enemy. High Counselor Thrax, his stony features unreadable, listened to the pronouncements of his fellow delegates. He had come to the same conclusion. The humans, whoever they were not a threat. They were something else entirely, something more. "We will send a delegation," he announced, his voice echoing with a finality that brooked no argument. "A single unarmed vessel, a diplomatic envoy. We will go to them not as a military power, not as a galactic empire, but as students, as supplicants. We will ask them what they want, and we will listen to their answer." The journey to the Veil Nebula was a silent, somber affair. The diplomatic vessel, a sleek silver craft designed for comfort and ceremony, felt like a child's toy as it approached the colossal form of the Human Warship. The ship, which the Ascendancy's astronomers had now named the Sentinel, filled the vessel's viewports, a mountain of dark metal and softly glowing lights against the vibrant tapestry of the nebula. As they drew closer, the ship's true scale became apparent. It was a city in space, a self-contained world, its hull adorned with structures and features that defied easy explanation. There were no visible weapon emplacements, no hangars, no obvious signs of military function. It was a thing of beauty, of elegant, brutalist design, a testament to a level of artistry and engineering that the Ascendancy could only dream of achieving. A communications channel opened, a calm male voice speaking the Cathar's own language with a fluency that was unnerving. "Welcome, delegates of the Cathar Ascendancy. We have been expecting you. Please proceed to the designated docking bay. You will be received." The voice was devoid of any emotion, yet it was not cold. It was serene, the voice of a being that was utterly at peace with itself and its place in the universe. The docking bay was a cavernous space, large enough to hold a fleet of the Ascendancy's cruisers. The diplomatic vessel settled onto the designated landing platform with a soft hiss, and the delegates, led by High Counselor Thrax himself, disembarked. They were greeted by a single figure, a being that was both familiar and utterly alien. It was a human, taller than the average Cathar, with a bipedal form, 2 arms, and a head that housed 2 forward-facing eyes. The human was clad in a simple, form-fitting gray uniform, devoid of any rank or insignia. Its face was calm, its expression unreadable. "I am the emissary," the human said, its voice the same serene, emotionless tone from the transmission. "On behalf of the people of Earth, I welcome you to the UNS Vigilance." The name of the ship, Vigilance, sent a fresh wave of understanding through Thrax. It was not a name of aggression, it was a name of purpose, of duty. "We are honored by your reception," Thrax replied, his own voice a low rumble. "We have come to seek understanding. We have so many questions." The emissary nodded slowly. "And we will answer them. But first, there is something you must see, something you must understand before we can proceed." The emissary led them from the docking bay, through a series of corridors that were as vast and silent as a cathedral. The walls were lined with the same soft, glowing light that emanated from the ship's hull, and the air was cool and still. There was no sense of a crew, no sign of any other living beings. It was as if the ship itself was alive and the emissary was its chosen avatar. They arrived at a large, circular chamber, the walls of which were a single, seamless screen. The emissary gestured to the center of the room and the screen flickered to life. It showed an image of a world, a beautiful blue-green orb teeming with life. "This is Earth," the emissary said, a faint, almost imperceptible note of warmth entering its voice for the first time. "Our home, or rather, what was our home." The image shifted, the beautiful world now scarred and broken, its oceans boiling, its continents wreathed in fire. "We were not always a peaceful people," the emissary continued, its voice now laced with a deep, ancient sadness. "We were a species of great passion, of great ambition, and of great folly. We fought amongst ourselves, we poisoned our world, we came to the very brink of self-annihilation. It was in our darkest hour, when all hope seemed lost, that we finally found our unity. We put aside our petty squabbles, our tribal hatreds, and we came together as a single people with a single purpose, to survive." The image on the screen changed again, showing vast, ark-like ships leaving the ruined Earth, venturing out into the darkness of space. "We left our cradle, a species of refugees fleeing a self-inflicted wound. We journeyed for generations, seeking a new home. Along the way, we learned. We grew. We shed the skin of our violent past and embraced a new philosophy, one of non-interference, of quiet observation. We had seen the fire of our own creation, and we vowed that we would never again allow it to burn so brightly." The screen now showed the construction of the Vigilance, a colossal undertaking that spanned centuries. The ship was not built as a weapon of war, but as a sanctuary, a library, a guardian. "We built this ship, and others like it, not to conquer the galaxy, but to watch over it. To be a silent, unseen presence, a reminder that even in the darkest of nights, there is always the hope of dawn." The emissary turned to face Thrax, its eyes, for the first time, showing a flicker of emotion. It was not sadness, not pity, but a deep, profound empathy. "We have watched your people for millennia, High Counselor. We have seen your struggles, your triumphs, your moments of great wisdom, and your moments of great folly. We have seen in you the same fire that once burned in us, the same potential for greatness, and the same capacity for self-destruction." The human revealed that their long-slumbering ships were positioned in numerous systems with nascent civilizations, acting as silent observers. The genome they had broadcast was not a threat, but a gift. It was a complete record of every species that had ever existed on Earth, a testament to the life they had almost lost, a warning against the dangers of unchecked ambition. The complex, species-specific messages were a test, a way to gauge the Ascendancy's wisdom, their capacity for reason and empathy. They had passed. The revelation was a hammer blow to Thrax's understanding of the universe. The humans were not gods, not conquerors. They were survivors, penitents, a species that had walked through the fires of hell and emerged on the other side, scarred but not broken, their spirit forged in the crucible of their own near extinction. They were the galaxy's silent, self-appointed guardians, their long, lonely vigil a testament to their repentance, their hope for a better future, not just for themselves, but for all life. The arrogance of the Cathar Ascendancy, their belief in their own supremacy, their petty political squabbles, all of it seemed so utterly insignificant in the face of this. They were not the masters of the galaxy. They were just one of a multitude of young, boisterous species, still learning to walk, while the humans, the ancient, weary elders, watched over them with the patient, sad eyes of a parent who has seen their child make the same mistakes they once made. The chamber fell silent, the only sound the soft hum of the ship's systems. Thrax, the ancient being of stone, felt a sensation he had not experienced in millennia. He felt small, humbled, and in that humility he found a new kind of strength, a strength that came not from power but from understanding. "What do you want from us?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The emissary's response was simple, yet it held the weight of 1,000 lifetimes of experience. "We want nothing from you. We want everything for you. We want you to learn from our mistakes. We want you to choose a different path. We want you to become the great civilization we know you can be." The offer was not one of conquest, but of mentorship, an invitation to join a larger galactic community, one based not on power and control, but on mutual respect, shared knowledge, and a common purpose. The Ascendancy, which had for so long believed itself to be the pinnacle of civilization in the galaxy, was being offered a chance to become something more, a partner, an equal, a friend. The journey back to the Grand Conclave was a quiet one, filled with a sense of profound and irreversible change. The delegates, once so divided, were now united in a shared sense of awe and purpose. The report they delivered to the conclave was met not with debate or argument, but with a deep, resonant silence of understanding. The decision was unanimous. The Cathar Ascendancy would accept the humans' offer. They would open their borders, share their knowledge, and work together to build a future that was brighter than any of them could have imagined on their own. An era of unprecedented peace and prosperity began. The humans, true to their word, did not interfere in the Ascendancy's internal affairs. They were advisors, mentors, guides. They shared their technology, their philosophy, their history, and in return they asked for only one thing, that the Ascendancy learn, that they grow, that they never forget the lessons of the past. The galaxy, for the first time in its long and bloody history, was at peace. But the universe is a vast and ancient place, and there are secrets hidden in the darkness between the stars that are older and more terrible than any one civilization can comprehend. The alliance between the humans and the Cathar Ascendancy was a beacon of hope in a galaxy that had known only conflict, but it was a small, fragile light in a much larger darkness. Vigilance, the silent sentinel that had watched over the Ascendancy for so long, remained in the Veil Nebula, its vigil not over but changed. It was no longer a silent observer, but an active partner, its powerful sensors now linked to the Ascendancy's own, creating a network of shared knowledge that spanned 1,000 light years. It was through this network that the new discovery was made. It was a signal, not unlike the one that the Vigilance itself had once emitted, but this one was different. It was older, much older, and it was coming from outside the galaxy. The signal was a whisper at first, a faint, almost imperceptible murmur in the cosmic background radiation. But it was growing stronger, clearer with each passing cycle. The Signians, with their unparalleled analytical abilities, were the first to decipher it. It was not a message of peace, not a greeting from a fellow traveler. It was a warning, a desperate, terrified scream across the void. The human emissary, its usual calm demeanor now tinged with a deep, somber gravity, met with High Counselor Thrax in the now silent chamber of the Vigilance. The screen that had once shown the history of Earth now displayed a new image, a chilling, terrifying sight. It was a galaxy not their own, but one far, far away, and it was dying. Consumed by a darkness that was spreading from its core, a darkness that was not the absence of light, but a presence, a force, an entity of unimaginable power and malevolence. We have known of this threat for a long time. The emissary's voice was heavy with the weight of a burden that had been carried for eons. It is the reason we built these ships, the reason we have kept our long vigil. We called it the Silence, a force that consumes all life, all light, all sound. It moves from galaxy to galaxy, leaving only darkness and emptiness in its wake. It is the great filter, the final, terrible answer to the question of why the universe is so silent. The signal they had received was the last, desperate cry of a civilization that had stood against the silence and lost. A warning sent out into the void in the hope that someone, somewhere, would hear it. And now, the silence was coming for them. The revelation was a cold, chilling hand that gripped the heart of the newly formed alliance. The peace they had so carefully constructed, the future they had so hopefully imagined, was now threatened by a foe that was beyond their comprehension. The human warship, the Vigilance, which they had once believed to be an artifact, then a guardian, was now revealed to be something else entirely. It was a lifeboat, a sentinel not just for a single species, but for an entire galaxy. And its long, silent vigil was about to come to an end. The roar it had emitted when it awoke was not a cry of aggression, but a call to arms, a signal to its sister ships, scattered across the galaxy, to awaken from their long slumber and prepare for the final, desperate battle for the survival of all life. High Counselor Thrax, his stony form seeming to shrink under the weight of this new, terrible knowledge, looked at the emissary, at the calm, sad eyes of a being that had lived with this truth for longer than his own species had existed. He saw not fear, but a quiet, unyielding resolve. The humans had faced their own extinction once before and had emerged stronger, wiser. They would face this new threat with the same courage, the same determination, and they would not face it alone. The Cathar ascendancy, the Vulcarian hegemony, the Cygnian technocracy, the Lumini, all the myriad species of the galaxy, they would stand with them. They would face the coming darkness together, a united front against the silent, all-consuming night. The artifact that had been a mystery, then a marvel, was now their last best hope. The human warship and the ancient, weary, but unbreakable spirit of the people who had built it would be their shield. The galaxy was no longer silent. And it would not fall without a fight. The future was uncertain, the enemy unimaginable, but for the first time in the face of the ultimate threat, the galaxy was truly united. And in that unity there was a glimmer of hope, a small, defiant light against the encroaching darkness. A light that had been kindled in the heart of a human warship, and which now burned in the souls of 1,000 different species, all of them looking to the stars, not with fear, but with a shared, unwavering resolve to survive. The age of silence was over. A new age, an age of defiance, had begun.